somewhere inside the walls of Al Yamama Palace in Riyadh, or perhaps behind the gates of a private estate in Europe, live several children, who will, one day, likely help shape the future of one of the most powerful and wealthiest nations on earth. Their father is Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a man whose yachts, paintings, and palaces make headlines constantly, yet almost nothing verified is known about his own children, not their personalities, not their daily lives, not even, in most public reporting, reliable agreement on how many there are. In a world where the children of billionaires and celebrities are routinely photographed, profiled, and followed by paparazzi, the near-total invisibility of the Crown Prince's children stands out as a deliberate, carefully engineered silence. Understanding why requires understanding the man himself, the family he was born into, and the extraordinary pressures that come with ruling a kingdom, like Saudi Arabia, in the 21st century. Mohammed bin Salman was born on August 31, 1985, in Jeddah, to Prince Salman bin Abdulaziz, later King Salman, and his wife Fada bint Fala al-Hithlain. He grew up as one of dozens of grandchildren in a royal family so large it numbers in the thousands, most of whom will never come close to real political power. Unlike many of his royal cousins, who were educated abroad in Europe and North America, MBS stayed in the kingdom, earning a law degree from King Saud University in Riyadh, before entering government service, as an aide to his father. For years, he remained a background figure in Saudi politics, one prince among dozens, with little indication that he would ever rise to become the most powerful man in the kingdom's modern history. That upbringing, inside the kingdom rather than outside it, matters more than it might first appear. The House of Saud has long operated according to a strict, unwritten code. The closer a family member sits to actual power, the more tightly their personal life is guarded. Wives, children, and even extended family, are rarely photographed, rarely named in state media, and almost never permitted to speak publicly, regardless of how modern or reform-minded the ruling generation claims to be. It's a tradition that predates MBS by generations, rooted as much in tribal custom as in modern security doctrine. And it is a tradition he has continued, and in some ways intensified, since becoming Crown Prince. MBS's ascent to power was remarkably fast by any royal family's standards. His father became king in January 2015, and within months, Mohammed bin Salman was appointed defense minister and deputy crown prince. By June 2017, in a move that stunned observers of Saudi politics, he was elevated to crown prince outright, leapfrogging more senior members of the family, and displacing his cousin Mohammed bin Nayef as heir to the throne. It was one of the fastest consolidations of power in the kingdom's modern history, transforming a man in his early 30s into the effective ruler of one of the world's most consequential nations, almost overnight. That same year, in November 2017, Saudi authorities detained dozens of the country's wealthiest princes, businessmen, and former officials at Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel, framing the sweep as an anti-corruption campaign. Critics have long viewed it as something more calculated, a decisive consolidation of power that removed potential rivals and centralized control of the kingdom's wealth directly under the new crown prince. Among those detained was his own cousin, billionaire investor Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. Many of those detained were released only after reportedly agreeing to hand over significant portions of their personal fortunes. A move that sent a clear message throughout the extended royal family about where power now truly resided. It's against this backdrop of rapid, sometimes ruthless consolidation of power that MBS's approach to his own family's privacy has to be understood. A man who eliminated potential threats from within his own extended family, almost overnight, has every reason to view exposure of his wife, his children, his household, not as a lifestyle preference, but as a genuine security calculation. In a family where rivals can be detained in luxury hotels and stripped of influence within days, protecting the one part of life that cannot be politically neutralized, the safety of one's own children, becomes an even higher priority than it might be for a more conventional head of state. Several distinct forces combine to explain why so little is publicly known about the Crown Prince's children. Security is the most obvious. MBS occupies what may be the single, most consequential and contested position in the Middle East, overseeing a nation central to global oil markets, regional politics, and increasingly, global finance, through the Public Investment Fund. That level of geopolitical significance makes his immediate family an obvious target for anyone. Foreign intelligence services, extremist groups, or rival factions within the royal family itself, looking to exert pressure on him, keeping his children's identities, routines, schools, and whereabouts out of public view isn't paranoia. It's standard practice for heads of state facing credible, ongoing threats, amplified here by the scale of Saudi Arabia's global footprint. Even minor details, like a school's location or a routine travel schedule, could in theory be exploited by hostile actors, which is precisely why so little of that information is ever allowed to reach public view in the first place. Tradition plays an equally significant role. Long before MBS was born, senior members of the Saudi royal family maintained strict boundaries between public duty and private life. Wives are rarely seen or named in official contexts. Children are kept out of media coverage until, and unless, they take on formal public roles themselves later in life. This isn't unique to MBS's branch of the family. It echoes across the wider House of Saud, and more broadly across several Gulf monarchies, where royal privacy is treated as a matter of dignity and cultural norm as much as security. Even King Salman himself, MBS's own father, spent decades governing Riyadh, with relatively little personal media coverage, a pattern of restraint that has simply carried forward into the next generation, now amplified by the added weight of global attention MBS himself commands. The Khashoggi killing reshaped everything that followed. In October 2018, journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside the Saudi consulate, in Istanbul, in an operation that U.S. intelligence assessments later concluded was likely approved by Mohammed bin Salman himself, a conclusion Saudi officials have publicly disputed. Whatever one's view of that assessment, the international fallout that followed made MBS one of the most scrutinized, and most personally targeted, public figures in the world. In the years since, control over information, about his movements, his finances, and above all his family, has only tightened, not loosened, where before the killing there may have been room for occasional glimpses of his private life to leak into public view. The years since have seen that door close almost entirely, replaced by a far more disciplined, centrally managed approach to what the world is permitted to know. And then, there is the matter of scrutiny itself. MBS has spent years cultivating an image of Saudi Arabia as a modernizing, reform-driven kingdom, lifting the ban on women driving, reopening public cinemas after a 35-year ban, and pouring state investment into massive cultural and entertainment projects like Neom and Al-Qidiyah. At the same time, human rights organizations have documented the continued detention of activists and tight restrictions on political dissent. In a climate where every aspect of his rule is dissected and debated globally, allowing his children to become public figures, subject to the same relentless coverage international royals like the British monarchy now face, would introduce a level of scrutiny the family has, apparently, decided isn't worth the exposure. Every photograph, every school, every friendship a royal child might form abroad becomes, in this climate, a potential story, and the family appears to have concluded that the safest policy is simply to generate no material for that story to be built upon. MBS married his first cousin, Princess Sarah bint Mashur bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, in 2008, and the couple has several children together. That is, in essence, close to the full extent of what can be stated with real confidence. Beyond that baseline, public reporting fractures quickly. Different outlets have published wildly inconsistent claims about the number of children, their names, ages, and even their genders, with little independent verification behind most of it. There are no confirmed social media accounts, no authorized interviews, and only the rarest of official photographs offering even a glimpse of MBS's family life. Even Saudi state media, which extensively covers the Crown Prince's public engagements, diplomatic visits and economic announcements, almost never mentions his children directly, treating that dimension of his life as entirely separate from his public role as a head of state. This scarcity isn't an accident of poor record-keeping. It reflects a family, and a state apparatus around that family, that has made a conscious, sustained decision to keep this particular sphere of life sealed off from public view. Likely a combination of the security realities, described above, and the simple cultural expectation, inherited across generations of the House of Saud that royal children are raised, educated, and prepared for eventual public life entirely away from cameras and headlines. It's a strategy that requires enormous discipline to maintain, given how much global media attention follows MBS's every public move, and the fact that it has largely succeeded speaks to just how seriously the family treats this particular boundary. MBS's approach isn't an outlier within the region, it's closer to the norm. Across Gulf monarchies, from Qatar to the UAE to Saudi Arabia, the general pattern holds. Senior royals appear constantly in state media, delivering policy announcements, meeting foreign leaders, and opening new developments, while their spouses and children remain almost entirely absent from that same coverage until they are old enough and politically ready enough to step into public roles of their own. It is a deliberate contrast to Western royal families like the British monarchy, where children of the line of succession are photographed from infancy and grow up largely within public view, their milestones celebrated openly rather than hidden away. That contrast is worth sitting with for a moment because it says something about two very different theories of how to protect a family in power. Western monarchies, operating in an environment of relatively transparent institutions and long-established constitutional limits, have generally leaned into visibility, controlled, curated visibility, but visibility nonetheless, as a way of building public affection and legitimacy over a lifetime. Gulf monarchies, operating in a very different security and political environment, have leaned the opposite direction entirely, treating invisibility itself as the safeguard, and reserving public exposure only for the moment an heir is ready to assume real responsibility. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong, they simply reflect two very different calculations about where legitimacy and safety are best secured. It's worth noting that this kind of privacy is rarely permanent within royal families. It tends to lift gradually as children come of age and begin to take on responsibilities of their own. MBS's own father, King Salman, was a relatively obscure regional governor for much of his life, before ascending to national prominence. MBS himself was, by most accounts, a background figure within the royal family well into his 20s, largely unknown outside Saudi political circles until his father's rise to the throne suddenly thrust him into the spotlight. That same pattern has played out for generations across the House of Saud, where visibility tends to arrive suddenly, tied directly to political necessity, rather than gradually, tied to simple public curiosity. If history within the House of Saud repeats itself, at least one of MBS's children may eventually step out from behind that same wall of silence. Not through a leaked photograph or an unauthorized interview, but through a formal, carefully managed introduction to public life, timed entirely on the family's own terms, once the security calculations and political readiness align. Until that day comes, the silence surrounding them is unlikely to break, and speculation about their lives, the kind that fills much of what circulates online today, will likely remain exactly that. Speculation, unconfirmed by the one family capable of confirming it. Viewers and readers eager for details are, in effect, left facing a wall the family has built with considerable care, and no amount of online speculation has managed to find a way past it. What's clear is this: the silence isn't accidental, and it isn't simply about a father's personal preference for privacy. It's the product of security realities unique to one of the most geopolitically significant figures alive, layered onto generations of royal tradition, and reinforced by a decade in which nearly everything else about Mohammed bin Salman, his wealth, his politics, his controversies, has been dragged relentlessly into public view. In a life lived almost entirely under a global microscope, his children may be the one part of it he has genuinely managed to keep his own, a small, deliberately guarded space in an otherwise fully exposed public existence. Note: verified, independently confirmed details about Mohammed bin Salman's children, including their number, names, and ages, remain scarce and inconsistent across public sources. this piece reflects publicly reported context about Saudi royal privacy customs and security considerations, rather than confirmed specifics about the children themselves, out of respect for the fact that they are minors, whose privacy has been deliberately protected.